Hello and welcome to Simon Says Sports, a New York sports podcast. We are cross-listed over today on Gangrene Against the World. This will be episode 32, as we'll get things started with the New York Jets. And for all you Gangrene Against the World subscribers, if you want to keep listening in after I talk Justin Fields and Tyrod Taylor and the decisions that Aaron Glenn has to keep making as we go throughout this horrible year, you can just keep listening and hear about the other stuff we cover on Simon Says Sports. On the road this week, and this is why I'm doing a little double posting to make sure that I keep tabs on everything that's going on in the world of New York sports. November 19th, 2025. So we'll start with the Jets. We'll get to the Trent Grisham qualifying offer that's accepted. We'll get to the banged up New York Knicks. We'll talk a little hockey as well. But let's start with the New York Jets as they get ready to go to Baltimore. They'll be 2-8. When they enter that stadium, they'll be double-digit underdogs. Right now, 13.5-point underdogs against the Ravens, who are trying to claw back with Lamar Jackson to make the playoffs in an AFC North that looks like could be for the taking as Aaron Rodgers is banged up with the Steelers. And for the Jets, Aaron Glenn made the right decision. It was probably a decision that was made a little too late, but it is the right choice overall because if you're going to get an idea of the skill position players on this team and what they can do for you in the future, and really the entire purpose for the last 7 games of the season is to see what parts on this team are worth keeping. We know Tyrod Taylor is most likely not going to be the backup next year. We seem to know for sure that Justin Fields has no future with the Jets, does not seem to have a future as a starting quarterback in this league. And I'm sure at some point we're going to see Brady Cook, and that is going to be a sight to behold, as I don't think Brady Cook is NFL ready at all. And they did the right thing. Even though Brady Cook is the only one who could theoretically have any future on this team, you can't just let your team know that you've fully given up on winning games by going to a rookie, unproven quarterback like Brady Cook. And the one thing that the Jets have done is they've brought in some interesting young skill position players, some throw-ins on the major trades they've made this year for Sauce Gardner and for Michael Carter II. And John Mechie seemed to be the best of the bunch on that first game against the Patriots. We know the story about A.D. Mitchell. He gets open a lot, but can he haul in those passes? And you can't figure that stuff out without having a quarterback who can function. And Justin Fields right now is just not a functioning quarterback in the NFL. We talked a lot about it at the beginning of this week. And really, he hasn't been a functioning quarterback since week 1. They put up points against the Bengals, but the Bengals defense is probably the worst in all of football. And the Ravens are the worst pass defending team in football too. So this should give Tyrod a chance to throw to some of these young guys, get them confident. The offensive line has played well. Membu has been the top-ranked tackle from this draft class. Fashanu has played better of late. And you need to reward these guys by giving them a chance to win. And although Justin Fields is a gamer and he tried in that game against the Patriots, he just can't do it. He can't drop back, throw a ball on time, and be able to put this team in a position to win. So Aaron Glenn, although he's still snipped with the New York media today, he just can't help himself as they ask him why he went with Tyrod Taylor. He said because he wanted to, and that's going to continue to get old. There's an approach with the media, whether it's New York media or national media or wherever you are, that you feel like you can just steamroll them, and that might work. If you're successful, it definitely works. But all Aaron Glenn is doing is hurting himself every single week by being this really coarse, unpleasant guy with the media. And then there's been a lot of spin. Oh, he's just taking the heat off of his team. He's just making himself the focus to take the focus off of the players because things have gone so poorly. But all you're doing is having these questions not answered by him have to go to the players. And what it's also doing too is there's no soft landing for Aaron Glenn anymore. You know, if they end up with a top 5 pick, a top 3 pick, it is going to be because they lost to teams like the Saints and the Dolphins. The Falcons are coming up as well. If you lose those games and you finish with a top 5 pick and you finish with 4 wins, 3 wins overall, this New York media is going to be out for blood. And now next year, if things continue to be poor, there's going to be no wiggle room whatsoever for Glenn. So for his own sake, he needs to get gentler with how he approaches the media. And some people like it. You know, the media are animals. The media are liars. They don't have to tell them anything. First off, it is our gateway to the team is through the media. It's how we learn about what's happening. And if you're not going to talk to them, it means you're not talking to us as well. And from a purely selfish standpoint for Aaron Glenn, unless he really turns this thing around over the next few years, and this defense isn't an embarrassment, and this team can start winning games, we're going to talk about a guy who, although I've come to terms with the fact that he will be here next year, could easily be a second-year casualty. And all it does is set up whoever they bring in a quarterback for failure when there's uncertainty with the head coach. So a lot to do there. The other thing that having Tyrod Taylor does, theoretically giving you a competent offense, is it takes a little pressure off this defense that has performed poorly in important stretches. It is remarkable to play 10 games and not accidentally pick off one pass. And we saw, Quinnen Williams on his new team do things he wasn't doing with the Cowboys, had a sack and a half when he had 1 sack total. I'd get a good laugh if Sauce Gardner finally picks off a pass with the Colts. He did drop one in the London game. But this defense is not a game-changing defense at all, and there are young pieces on that team too. And you need to be able to understand completely how you're going to mold this team around whatever the new foundation is going to be next year. So we'll get to more in the official preview of the Jets-Ravens game coming up on Friday. But that's a game that, the Ravens need to win. There's an opening in the AFC North for the Ravens, and they're there for the taking, I think. Lamar Jackson is healthy, and this team is looking better. But the defense is really bad in Baltimore, so an opportunity for the Jets. On the Giants front, quickly, they lose their first game under Mike Kafka. Another lead is blown, although it's against a much better team in Green Bay. The defense is terrible, and there's only so much meat on the bone left in terms of getting rid of guys. But Shane Bowen, the fact that he still has a job is really rough, and you have to question the leadership of the Giants right now, obviously, as they go through a decade of incompetence. Joe Shane being given the keys to this team still makes no sense whatsoever. And it's almost like he's holding on to Bowen as a way to let another guy be the fall guy when they finish poorly at the end of this year. And we're going to probably see a lot more Jameis Winston to end the season. Another early pick, a guy like Jalen Hyatt, who was supposed to be a big-time player for them, has a terrible performance and gives up on a pass route that ends up as an interception in the end zone by Winston. And this team is just full of dysfunction. For Jackson Dart's own safety, you shouldn't see too much of him the rest of the way. And the Giants are in rough shape. And Kafka has an opportunity to claim this job if he does a good job as the head coach. He's the person in the chair, which means he should be a front runner, but more blown leads the end of games, more lack of leadership. It's going to be a problem for the Giants. So if you're here for the football portion, Gangrene Against the World, we'll cover more on Friday, but we'll move off of the gridiron and go on to other things going on in the world of New York sports. And let's talk about the Yankees and the huge unforced error that Brian Cashman made by giving Trent Grisham a $22 million qualifying offer that you knew he was going to take. It now creates a logjam in this outfield. It is a lot of money for a guy who has one good offensive season. And even though he had good power numbers last year, he is nowhere near a top defensive player. And you can make an argument he's one of the worst defensive center fielders over the last year. He ranked last of the 17 qualifying outfielders in the StatCast fielding run value. He ranked last in outfielders or center fielders on Fangraph's defensive rating. This is the only time he's ever had a huge offensive production. He only hit 17 home runs once. He only drove in more than 60 runs once in his career. And to think this guy's going to do it again while now there's a target on him, it's just not going to happen. He was a no-show in the playoffs. And ultimately, it leaves so little wiggle room for you in the outfield. Now, are you going to move on from Jason Dominguez at this point? Because he does not have a clear path to a role unless you don't bring anyone else in the outfield, and that would be a debacle. And the other thing that's the problem with Grisham is he doesn't have any speed. So he hit a lot of home runs last year. Great. But what else did he do? Well, he had one stolen base, and he had the worst slugging percentage of the top 25 home run hitters last year. So he hit his 30-plus. That's great. He did nothing else. He gives you nothing else. I know for a lot of the season he's batting in front of Aaron Judge, so you don't want him to run. But none of his base running metrics are great. And he's a poor fielder now. He's now a net negative fielder. So you're putting yourself in a position that, all right, Grisham's going to be your center fielder until probably he loses the job. And then you're paying $22 million for a guy who doesn't have an important role on this team. a platoon outfielder. You have Jason Dominguez, who now doesn't have a path to regular playing time, and a kid you've had since he was 16 years old. You're not going to give yourself a chance to really evaluate him. And it also most likely means that you're only bringing in one of Kyle Tucker and Cody Bellinger, and that's fine. But Bellinger is getting on in age. He's past his peak. He does give you some flexibility because he plays all three outfield positions and can play first base. But even if you bring in him or Kyle Tucker, assuming you don't bring anyone else, that's still a full outfield, and someone's going to be the odd man out. Not to mention that you think Spencer Jones should have a chance to come up next year, although a guy who strikes out 200 times in the minors is going to really strike out a lot in the majors, so he has work to do. But it now makes it seem like he is very unlikely to have a role on this team in 2026. And unless they're going to make a big move for a pitcher, the Grisham signing, it's just a terrible, terrible mistake. You did not have to give him a qualifying offer. I know you don't want to lose a guy for nothing, but the risk of now having to pay him $22 million, and the Yankees can say that they thought it was a potential all they want. All the reports were that they thought he was not going to accept it. And Grisham probably thought, give me $22 million this year, and I can still get some sort of contract over the next few years, but he's never going to make $22 million in a year for the rest of his career. But this was his chance to maybe get a 3-year for $20 million a year kind of contract. But any advanced metric shows you that he's just not an important player. And a lot of people are like, why are Yankee fans complaining? They were the number one offense in all of baseball. It's because we know that he's not going to do this again. And instead of saying, hey, throwing in a trade ended up turning into a nice player for us. We kind of stole some production out of this guy when he's been a nothing player in his career. And now you're stuck with a big price tag and the long-term implications of, hey, now you don't get Kyle Tucker because of him, or maybe you don't get Bellinger because of him, or maybe you stay pat in the outfield, which would be a huge mistake because you think, hey, maybe Spencer Jones is close. It all leads to the likelihood that this offense is going to look identical as it did last year. And listen, they put up a lot of runs, but we know it's a flawed offense. We know it is, and we saw it in the playoffs. Now, on the flip side, if you say, hey, we did this because we knew that any trade for Tarek Skubal or Paul Skeens would have to require Jason Dominguez or Spencer Jones, then I'm a little bit more okay with it, but you're also going to have to give up some pitching for those guys. These are two of the most dominant pitchers in all of baseball, obviously. You need to give up a lot to get them, but any deal is worth it for those two guys. So if they do that, then I think it's okay. But the pitching rotation is not the concern next year, even though it's going to start off a little slow without Cole, without Rodon. Clark Schmidt's going to come back in the summer. You're going to go into the fall, hopefully, with Cole, Rodon, Max Fried, Schlittler, Schmidt, and Heel. Those are 6 really good pitchers, and you assume that Schmidt or Heel would be included in a deal for one of those pitchers, but it was a classic Cashman mistake where he's trying to nickel and dime for a draft pick, which is great, but it doesn't actually do you any favors in the long term. And at least it wasn't a long-term offer like they messed up with Aaron Hicks, but it still has that same feeling. Does Grisham maybe go ahead and hit more home runs next year? And does he go for 30 plus again? Then great. Then you got to steal. But your eyes tell you he's not the long-term option. He should not be your leadoff hitter. And he's a below-average defender, and this team needs to be better defensively, and he doesn't help that at all. So a real frustration. Was talking about it with Don Papa last week. I said it was a bad move then, and it turns out to be a bad move now. We'll see what other moves they make, but it certainly leads to a logjam in that outfield for the Yankees. All right, moving along to the Knicks. The Knicks 8-5. They've won 6 of 8. They play the Mavs tonight. Likely no Cooper Flagg, as the Mavs, probably the worst team in all of basketball. It's not the Brooklyn Nets. And Jalen Brunson might come back. He was upgraded to questionable for the game to play his old team. And the Knicks are a little banged up right now. Brunson's missed a couple games. OG Anunoby's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, so you got to feel that he's out multiple weeks with a hamstring injury. And OG, as great as he's been this year and as great as he's been the last few years, the guy just can't stay healthy, and that's a real problem. But they've won 6 of the last 8. They split their home and away against Miami without Brunson in their 141-32 win. Big Cat goes for 39-11. Andrew Shamet has a nice day, career high with 36 points. Josh Hart has a triple-double. And then even the loss, Hart had 14-9-6. So the role players stepped up. which is good. And the Knicks are playing better. Everyone's chasing the red hot Pistons, who've won 8 in a row. The Cavs are in second place. Then there's a lot of teams around 8 and 5, just like the Knicks are. The one interesting thing to keep looking for is how they're going to utilize Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson is a difference maker when he plays, but in the second game against Miami, he only played 18 minutes, and Mike Brown had said it was because Yabusele was playing well, but your eyes tell you that wasn't true. He wasn't playing better than Mitchell Robinson. Mitchell Robinson has such an impact on the team offensively with rebounding and, of course, protecting the rim. And they're one of the worst teams at, blocking shots at the rim in the league. And it's because he's not getting, he's only playing every other game. And when he's playing, he's still not giving you a ton of minutes. I know it's early. They're trying to manage his load so he can hopefully give you a full season and then give you some real depth and real run in the playoffs. But the good news is, and the Knicks, with them playing well after a relatively slow start, they're the third best offensive rating. They have the third best offensive rating according to StatMuse, only behind the Rockets and the Nuggets. They're a middle of the pack defensive team, but that's okay. You expected them to take a step back defensively, and if they're one of the elite scoring teams in the league, it doesn't really matter. You know that they can turn it on when they need to in the playoffs. But because they're bottom tier at the rim, Mitchell Robinson needs to be someone who gets healthy. The East is packed, and there's a lot of competition right now, but you got to feel good about the Knicks. Again, they play against the Mavs tonight, which should be a win even if Brunson doesn't play, as the Mavs are terrible. But we'll see how it goes for New York as they make it through Thanksgiving and, all eyes on Christmas. That's really the first checkpoint of the season. Where do you rank out as you hit Christmas and head into the new year? They should be a top 3 team in the East at least this year. And so far, they're trending in that direction, which is great. We'll end with a little bit of hockey today. The Devils have a no-show performance against the Lightning, and Markstrom's play has been an issue. He was not competitive last night. Maybe he's not healthy all the way yet, and if that's true, then you got to give him more time. Any long-term hope in the playoffs rides on Markstrom being healthy and able to perform well. Jake Allen has played really well when he's been starting. Nico Dawes is a really suitable backup right now in the NHL. He's played well and played well enough, at least, when he's had the call. But a tough one against the Lightning. They're still in the top 2 in the Metro Division, and they're playing well. We know they're going to be without Jack Hughes for 2 months. And that Jack Hughes injury is as bad for the team as is the craziness of that story. And I choose to believe them that it was a freak accident. It wasn't because, he had a little bit too much to drink or he wasn't messing around with the team, but it's a bizarre story to hear that he leaned on a glass and sliced his pinky open so badly that he needed surgery. Reports early on, or at least what they were hearing before they had the surgeries, they figured he would be out for the whole year. So 2 months isn't as bad, all things considered, and hopefully he's able to have full use of his hand. But a real blow to Jack Hughes, who was off to a great start. It puts pressure on the rest of this offense to perform better. Andre Palat has ranked out as probably the most efficient offensive player on this team so far this season in terms of grading, and that's not exactly what you expect or want. So Brat's going to have to step back. Nico Heishier's had a slowish start. You want to see him scoring a little bit more, but they're still in pretty good shape, all things considered. But it's another year where Jack Hughes is going to miss at least 20 games. He's only played more than 62 games once in his whole career. So a lot of work to be done for the Devils, but they still sit atop the Metro Division. And one with the Rangers, a terrible effort against the Golden Knights. A really bad film of JT Miller just giving up on a play that led to a goal. Listen, they're still in the hunt because they played such great defense, but they can't score anything. They're 1-7-1 at home. And at this point, you say, oh, law of averages look at better. This could be a team that wins, 15 games at home, which is amazing to think about. But they're in a bad way. There's effort there in front of Igor, but there's been no offensive production to speak of. We've talked about it every time. At what point do you trade Panarin and do you punt on this season? Because they're 2 points behind the Islanders, but they've played one more game than the Islanders. They're 5 points behind the Devils. They've played 2 more games than the Devils and Hurricanes. They have a road game coming up against Carolina as well. So things are in a very bad way for the New York Rangers. They've saved themselves a little bit by playing so well on the road, but you can't sustain having one game in your first 9 or 10 at home at the Garden. And I'm sure hearing it from the Rangers fans every day grows tiresome for sure. So This has been episode 7 of the Simon Says Sports Podcast, the New York Sports Podcast, in combination with Gangrene Against the World. I'm Allan Simon. Thank you so much for listening.